I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. The screech of wood against marble, the sudden drop, the collective gasp. My daughter's wedding day, and I was flat on my back, staring up at crystal chandeliers, while 200 guests fell silent. But here's what nobody knew that day. What nobody could have known? The man who pulled that chair wasn't just some cruel prankster. He was my father-in-law, Richard Carmichael. And what happened next would unravel 30 years of carefully constructed lies. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because revenge, real revenge, doesn't happen in a moment. It ferments, it ages. And when it's finally poured out, it changes everything. My name is David Harrison, and I married into the Carmichael family when I was 26 years old. Sarah Carmichael was everything I'd ever wanted. Smart, beautiful, compassionate, but more than that, she saw me. Really saw me. Not the poor kid from the wrong side of town, not the scholarship student working 3 jobs to get through college. She saw David. Just David. Her father saw something different. From the moment Sarah brought me home, Richard Carmichael looked at me like I was dirt on his Italian leather shoes. Old money has a particular way of making you feel small without saying a word. It's in the pause before they shake your hand, the way they glance at your outfit, the slight smile that never reaches their eyes. Richard Carmichael was a titan. Real estate empire spanning 3 states. Country club president. His signature on charity checks that could fund small nations. And I was the factory worker's son who had the audacity to love his daughter. Our wedding was 30 years ago. Sarah wanted something small, intimate. Richard insisted on a spectacle. 300 guests. Symphony orchestra. Flowers imported from Ecuador. He paid for everything, which meant he controlled everything, including the seating chart that placed my parents at table 17, tucked behind a decorative column. I swallowed it. I smiled. I danced. I told myself that love was enough. It had to be. The years that followed were a masterclass in subtle humiliation. Richard would invite us to family dinners and spend the evening discussing investments, dropping names of CEOs, talking about his latest property acquisition. Then he'd turn to me with that smile.
Ow!
And how's the teaching going, David? Still shaping young minds? I was a high school history teacher. I loved it. But in Richard's mouth, it sounded like failure. Sarah would squeeze my hand under the table. She understood. She'd grown up with this man. She knew the games he played, but she also loved him. In that complicated way you love a parent who wounds you while claiming it's for your own good. We had 2 children, Marcus, and then 5 years later, Emma. Richard doted on them in his way. Generous with gifts, stingy with warmth. He'd buy Marcus a new bike, but never ask about his baseball games. He'd fund Emma's dance classes, but never attend her recitals, unless there was an audience. Then Richard Carmichael was grandfather of the year. I built my life around small dignities. I coached Marcus's Little League team. I never missed Emma's performances, even if it meant grading papers at midnight. I invested every spare dollar we had, slowly, carefully. Sarah worked as a pediatric nurse, and together we created something Richard's money couldn't buy. A home filled with actual love, but Richard never let me forget my place. At Marcus's high school graduation, Richard stood up during the family dinner and gave a toast about the importance of ambition, about how the Carmichael men were leaders, innovators, empire builders. Then he looked at Marcus and said, "Don't settle for good enough. Aim higher than that." His eyes flicked to me for just a second. Sarah's hand found mine again under the table. Marcus, brilliant Marcus, raised his glass and said, "I plan to be exactly like my dad, a teacher who actually changes lives." Richard's smile froze. I'd never loved my son more, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because this story, this revenge story, really begins 5 years ago. Emma was 23, working at a nonprofit, when she met James Whitmore. Whitmore, even the name sounded like money, and it was. James's family owned a pharmaceutical company. Not Carmichael-level wealth, but close. More importantly, they were Richard's kind of people. I watched my daughter fall in love, and I was genuinely happy for her. James was kind, respectful. He looked at Emma the way I'd looked at Sarah all those years ago. Like she was the center of his universe. Richard was ecstatic. Finally, a wedding he could brag about. Finally, a son-in-law worthy of the Carmichael name. The engagement party was at the country club. 200 guests, ice sculptures, a string quartet. Richard gave a speech about family legacy, about the joining of two great families, about the future. He welcomed James with open arms. Then he made a joke. At least this time we won't have to worry about anyone marrying above their station. The room laughed. Polite, champagne-soaked laughter. Sarah's hand tightened on my arm. Emma's smile wavered. But Richard just winked at me, like it was all in good fun. That night, lying in bed, Sarah cried. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry he's like this. It's not your fault," I told her, and I meant it. But something shifted in me that night. 30 years of small cuts, and I was finally feeling the blood loss. The wedding planning was Richard's dream come true. He threw money at every detail. The venue was a historic estate. The dress was custom designed. The guest list read like a who's who of wealth and influence. And I smiled. I nodded. I let him have his moment. Because Emma was radiant, and that's all that mattered. But 3 months before the wedding, something happened that changed everything. I was at home grading papers when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Harrison?" "David Harrison. Speaking. My name is Patricia Velasco. I'm an attorney with Hendricks and Ross. I represent the estate of Margaret Carmichael."
Accurate.
Richard's mother. She'd passed away 2 weeks earlier. I'd barely known her. Richard kept his family at a distance, even from Sarah. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said automatically.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
"I'm calling because you're named in Mrs. Carmichael's will." The room tilted slightly. "I'm sorry, what?" Margaret Carmichael left specific instructions. "There's a sealed envelope addressed to you. According to her wishes, it's to be delivered to you personally, and you're to read it alone before deciding whether to share its contents." 2 days later, I sat in my home office with a manila envelope. Expensive paper. Margaret Carmichael's initials embossed in gold. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, 6 pages. "Dear David, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I should have given you this information years ago, but I was a coward. I chose my son over the truth. I hope you can forgive me. What follows will hurt, but you deserve to know. What came next shattered my understanding of everything Margaret wrote about Richard's first marriage. Before Sarah's mother, a woman named Catherine Brennan. They'd married young, barely out of college. Catherine was pregnant within months, but Catherine wasn't from the right family. She was middle class, working as a secretary. Richard's father had plans for his son. Big plans. Plans that didn't include a secretary wife and an unplanned baby. So Richard's father made Catherine an offer. $500,000? Enough to disappear, raise the child somewhere far away, and never contact the Carmichael family again. Catherine took it. She was 22 years old, pregnant and terrified. She took the money and moved to Oregon. The baby was a boy. Born in March 1965, Margaret's letter included a name, an address, and a photograph. The photograph showed a young man, maybe 30, with Richard's eyes and jaw. Standing next to him was a teenage boy. Written on the back, Robert Brennan and Son, David. Christmas 1995. I stared at that photograph for an hour. David, my name. My birth year. My mother's maiden name was Brennan. Margaret's letter continued. Richard doesn't know I kept track of Catherine. Doesn't know that I sent money over the years, anonymously, to help with your education. When you won that scholarship to college, I was so proud. When you met Sarah, I thought it was fate's cruel joke. But then I saw how happy you made her. And I realized that perhaps some good could come from this terrible secret. You are Richard's son, David, his firstborn. And he has spent 30 years treating you like you were beneath him. never knowing the truth. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you are. What you do with this information is your choice. I only ask that you protect Sarah and the children. They're innocent in all of this. With love and profound regret, Margaret Ty sat in that office until Sarah came home. I didn't tell her. Not that night. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. My entire life had just been rewritten. The man who humiliated me for 30 years was my father. The woman I married was my half-sister. No, wait, the genetics didn't work that way. Sarah's mother was Richard's second wife. We shared a father, not blood close enough to. I did the research, spent nights on medical websites, genetic counseling forums, half-siblings through a father only. Our children were fine, healthy. The risk was minimal, barely elevated, but the truth remained. I'd married my half-sister, and Richard never knew. The anger came in waves. Then, the questions. Had my mother known? I went through her things, boxes in the attic. Found old letters. A bank statement from 1989 showing regular deposits from Trust. Margaret had kept her promise. She'd helped raise me from a distance. My mother, Catherine Brennan Harrison, died when I was 19. She never told me about Richard, never explained those deposits. She'd taken the secret to her grave. I spent 2 months in a fog. Sarah knew something was wrong. I told her I was stressed about work. She believed me because she wanted to. Because in 30 years, I'd never lied to her. This lie was eating me alive. Emma's wedding was 3 weeks away when I made my decision. I wasn't going to expose the truth, not publicly. That would destroy Sarah, would devastate Emma on her wedding day, would hurt Marcus and the grandchildren. But Richard Carmichael needed to know. Needed to understand what he'd done. Needed to feel, for once in his privileged life, the weight of his choices. I planned it carefully. The wedding was at Ashford Estate. 6-hour event. Ceremony, cocktails, reception. Richard had spared no expense. He'd even insisted on a special moment during the reception. Father of the bride and father of the groom speeches before dinner. I wrote 2 speeches. One that Emma would expect. Heartfelt, loving, short, and one that Richard would never forget. The wedding day arrived. Emma was stunning. Sarah cried happy tears. Marcus stood beside me as best man, my rock through all of this. He knew something was bothering me. I'd told him I'd explain after the wedding. The ceremony was perfect. James's vows made Emma cry. Emma's vows made everyone cry. As they walked back down the aisle, husband and wife, I felt my resolve harden. The cocktail hour passed in a blur. Guests mingled. Richard held court, basking in the glory of his production. He kept introducing James's father to various business connections. The proud patriarch. Then came the reception. Everyone found their seats. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal, flowers, a live band. Emma and James had their first dance. Then the father-daughter dance. I held Emma and whispered, "I'm so proud of you. So proud of the woman you've become." "I love you, Dad," she said. "Thank you for everything." My heart nearly broke. Then came the speeches. The best man spoke. The maid of honor spoke. Then the MC announced, and now the fathers. First, father of the bride, David Harrison. I stood, walked to the microphone, looked out at 200 faces. Sarah smiled at me encouragingly. Emma glowed. Marcus gave me a subtle nod. And Richard sat at the head table, wineglass in hand, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. Ready to critique my teaching salary sentimentality, I pulled out the folded papers from my jacket pocket. "Thank you all for being here," I began. When Emma asked me to speak tonight, I thought about what a father should say on his daughter's wedding day. The traditional speech, the jokes about James, the tears, the memories, polite laughter. But then I realized that today isn't just about Emma and James. It's about family, about legacy, about the truth we pass down through generations. I saw Richard shift slightly. Sarah's smile wavered with confusion. 30 years ago, I married into the Carmichael family. I was 26, poor, ambitious, and hopelessly in love with a woman who was way out of my league. More laughter. Sarah blushed. Sarah's father, Richard, made it very clear from the beginning that I wasn't what he had in mind for his daughter. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't connected. I wasn't worthy. The room got quieter. Richard's smirk faded. For 30 years, I've endured subtle insults, jokes about my profession, reminders that I married above my station, and I took it. Because I loved Sarah, because I loved our children, because I thought that's what you do for family. I paused, took a breath, but 3 months ago, I learned something that changed my entire understanding of family, of legacy, of truth. Sarah's face went pale. Marcus leaned forward. I learned that Richard Carmichael had a first marriage, before Sarah's mother, to a young woman named Catherine Brennan, a working-class girl who got pregnant, an inconvenient truth for a man with ambitions. Richard stood up. David, what the hell are you doing? Sit down, Richard. My voice was steel. For once in your life, sit down and listen.
Ow.
The room was frozen. Emma looked terrified. James held her hand. Richard's father paid Catherine $500,000 to disappear. To raise his child alone? To never contact the Carmichael family again. And she did. She moved to Oregon. Worked 2 jobs. Raised a son by herself. A son who never knew his real father. This is insane, Richard said, but his voice shook. That son grew up poor. Worked his way through college on scholarships. Became a teacher. Met a beautiful woman named Sarah Carmichael. Fell in love. And spent 30 years being treated like garbage by a man who never knew the truth. I pulled out the photograph. Margaret's photograph. Your mother knew Richard? Margaret knew everything. She helped Catherine over the years. Anonymous donations. Scholarship money. She made sure that boy had a chance. Walked toward Richard's table. Placed the photograph in front of him. That boy was me. I'm your son, Richard. Your firstborn. The child you never knew existed because your father paid to erase him. The room exploded. Gasps. Whispers. Sarah made a sound like all the air had left her body. Emma stood up, her face white. Marcus was beside me in seconds. Richard stared at the photograph. His hand shook. All the color drained from his face. No, he whispered. No, that's not. My mother would have. Your mother left me a letter. Explaining everything. It's with my attorney. Along with DNA evidence from samples I had independently tested. We share DNA, Richard. Father and son. Sarah was crying. Not the happy tears from earlier. These were sobs of confusion and pain. But that means... Emma's voice was small, broken. Dad, that means you and Mom are half-siblings, I said gently. We share a father. Not close enough to cause problems. Marcus and you are healthy. It's genetically distant enough. But yes. The man who thought I wasn't good enough for his daughter is actually my father. Richa collapsed back into his chair. He looked old suddenly. Small. I spent 30 years, I continued. My voice breaking now. Being told I wasn't enough. That I was beneath this family. And all along, I had more right to the Carmichael name than anyone. I was the firstborn son. The heir that was erased because I wasn't convenient. I turned back to the crowd. Found Emma's eyes. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry I'm telling you this on your wedding day. But your grandfather was about to give a speech about family legacy, about worthiness. And I couldn't let him stand up here and continue the lie. Richard made a sound. Almost a moan. I didn't know. David, I swear I didn't know. But you knew you had a first wife. You knew there was a child. And you never asked. Never wondered. Never cared. Because it was easier to forget, to erase, to pretend it never happened. I walked back to the microphone. The room was silent except for quiet crying. Here's what I want you all to know. The revenge I could take right now is enormous. I could sue for my portion of the Carmichael estate. As the eldest son, I could claim rights to inheritance. I could expose this publicly. Destroy the Carmichael reputation. Make Richard pay for 30 years of humiliation. Richard's head was in his hands, but I'm not going to do that. Because revenge isn't about destruction. It's about truth. It's about making someone understand what they've done. And Richard finally understands. I looked at Emma. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you come from. You deserve to know that blood and money don't make a family. Love does. Respect does. Your mother and I built a family on truth, even when we didn't know all of it. And you and James will do the same. I turned to Sarah. She was staring at me with a mix of shock and something else. Something that might have been relief. Sarah, I love you. I've loved you for 30 years. That doesn't change. The legality of our marriage might be complicated, but the love isn't. We'll figure this out, together. Then I looked at Richard one more time. You wanted to know why I was never good enough? Why I never measured up. It's because you were measuring me against a ghost. Against the son you abandoned. Well, here I am. Your firstborn. And I don't need your approval anymore. I never did. I set down the microphone and walked back to my seat. The room stayed silent for what felt like hours. Then Marcus stood. Started clapping. Slow at first. Then Emma stood, tears streaming, and clapped. Then James, then, one by one, half the room rose in applause. Not for the drama. For the truth, Richard sat alone at the head table, staring at a photograph of his first son. The son he never knew he was humiliating. The son he spent 3 decades treating as less than. The reception continued, though it was subdued. Emma and James cut their cake. The band played. People danced, but the energy had shifted. Some guests left early. Others gathered in small groups, whispering. Sarah pulled me aside during the dancing. Her eyes were red but clear. Did you know? When you married me? No, I found out 3 months ago. Margaret's letter. Is our marriage even legal? I spoke to an attorney. It's complicated. Different states have different laws about half-siblings, but we're not close enough genetically to violate most incest laws. And we didn't know. Intent matters. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything he put you through. It's not your fault. He's still my father. I still love him, even though I hate what he did. I know. I'm not asking you to choose. What happens now? That's up to you. Up to all of us. Emma found me before the night ended. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. I'm proud of you, Dad. That took courage. I ruined your wedding. No, you told the truth at my wedding. There's a difference. And honestly, it's a hell of a story. James and I will never have a boring anniversary. Despite everything, I laughed. Richard left before the night ended. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't speak to anyone. Just walked out, a broken man. The aftermath was messy. Complex. Sarah and I met with attorneys. Genetic counselors. A therapist who specialized in complicated family dynamics. Legally, our marriage stood. We'd married without knowledge of the relationship, and the genetic distance was acceptable. Our vows were valid. Emotionally, it took time. Sarah needed space to process. So did I. We spent 3 months in couples therapy, working through the tangled mess of our family tree. Marcus handled it with surprising grace. Dad, you're still you. Mom's still Mom. Nothing really changed except we know more now. Emma took longer. She struggled with the idea that her grandfather was also... She couldn't quite say it, but she worked through it. Richard went silent. No calls, no visits. For 6 months, it was like he'd disappeared. Then, 7 months after the wedding, he showed up at my house. Alone, older looking than I'd ever seen him. Can we talk? He asked. Sarah was there. She nodded. We all sat in our living room, the room where we'd raised our children, and Richard Carmichael, titan of industry, cried. I didn't know, he said. I swear to God, David, I didn't know. My father told me Catherine lost the baby. Told me she'd taken the money and ended the pregnancy. I thought, I mourned that child. I was young and stupid, and I mourned what I thought was lost. Your mother knew different, my mother. He broke down again. My mother tried to tell me. Years later, when you and Sarah started dating, she tried to say something, but I wouldn't listen. I was so angry that Sarah was dating someone I thought was beneath us. I refused to hear it. You could have asked, could have wondered. I know. I was a coward. Just like with Catherine. I took the easy way out. Let my father handle it. Let my pride handle it. And I destroyed my relationship with my own son. The word hung in the air. Son, what do you want, Richard? Sarah asked quietly. Want to know him. I want to know my son. I want to apologize for 30 years of cruelty. I want. He looked at me with devastating honesty. I want a chance. I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. I looked at Sarah. She was crying. I looked at the photos on our wall. Marcus's graduation. Emma's wedding. 30 years of family. I'm not going to call you Dad, I said finally. That word belongs to the man who raised me. The factory worker who came to every school event. Who taught me to fish. Who showed me what it meant to be a good man. Richard nodded. I understand, but I'll give you a chance. Not for you. For Sarah, for our kids, for the family we've built, despite you. Thank you. And Richard, I leaned forward. If you ever treat me as less than again, if you ever make another comment about my worth, we're done. I don't need your money. Don't need your name. Don't need anything from you except basic human respect. You have it. You have my word. That was a year ago. Emma's first anniversary party was last month. Smaller than the wedding, family only. Richard was there. He's trying. It's awkward, strange, but he's trying. He set up a scholarship fund in my mother's name. Catherine Brennan, scholarship for first-generation college students. He didn't ask me first, just did it. When I found out, I didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. I'm still figuring that out. Sarah and I renewed our vows 6 months ago. Private ceremony, just us and the kids. We wrote new vows. Ones that acknowledged everything we'd learned, everything we'd survived. Marcus is engaged now. His fiancée knows the whole story. She says it's like a novel. I told her it's messier than any novel. Real life always is. Emma is pregnant. First grandchild. She asked if Richard could be in the baby's life. I said yes. He's trying. That has to count for something. People ask me if the revenge was worth it. If exposing Richard at the wedding was the right choice, here's what I know, that moment. Standing at the microphone, telling the truth, was the freest I'd felt in 30 years. Not because I destroyed Richard, but because I stopped carrying his shame. Stopped accepting his version of my worth. The real revenge wasn't the public humiliation. It was this. Richard Carmichael spent 30 years looking down on his own son.
Ow.
And now he has to live with that knowledge forever. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time he sees me, he sees the child he abandoned, the man he underestimated, the son he never knew he had, and I get to watch him understand day by day what he lost. The relationship we could have had, the grandson he could have known, the son who would have respected him if he'd been given the chance. That's revenge, not violence, not destruction. Just truth, served cold and clear. Sometimes Sarah asks if I regret it. If I wish I'd kept the secret, I tell her no. Because secrets kept me small for 30 years. Truth set me free. Did Richard pull my chair at my daughter's wedding? Yes, metaphorically. He'd been pulling the chair out from under me for 3 decades. But on Emma's wedding day, I finally stood up, and I've been standing ever since. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. Real revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. It's about speaking truth even when it costs everything. It's about deciding that you're worth more than someone else's opinion. Richard learned that the hard way. I learned it too, just from a different angle. And now you know the truth. The man who humiliated me was my father. and the woman I loved was my sister. And somehow, we built something beautiful anyway. If that story moved you, if it made you think about truth and family and the weight of secrets, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. And if you believe that revenge is best served as truth, hit that subscribe button, because there's more truth where this came from. Thanks for listening to my story. The shocking truth. The one that stunned everyone, including me.